Okay. Good morning and welcome to our January 2020 PowHERcircle Challenge. It's an exciting day to get things kicked off with our 7th PowHERcircle Challenge, which this time around our theme is on connectivity. And I'm really grateful for the 7 co-facilitators that have agreed to help me carry out the challenge. And we do that through intentional conversation, co-creating what our content and our theme and our discussion and our dialogue entails. We also have a journal that accompanies the PowHERcircle, which hopefully you received in an email. And so that's the introspective work, that's your work. And we've also just have a number of tools, 7 tools that we ask you to work through to take the level of, to absorb the level of discussion and learning that we are going through. So that's kind of what a PowHERcircle is: the conversations, the journaling, the introspection, and then taking action through the tools. What does that look like? And hopefully bits and pieces of what you most need at this point resonate and carry through in your intentional living and leading. That's the whole idea. So I'd like to introduce our first co-facilitator today, Catherine Pollock, on your top, should be your top left. And Catherine's helped me to launch many PowHERcircles, and I always appreciate the juicy conversations we get into. Catherine is a senior leader who builds meaningful relationships across multiple sectors to fully leverage mutual benefit and reciprocal impact. So to be quite honest, I can't think of I just can't think of a better person to help me kick off this connectivity challenge. And today our theme is the greatness grid, our greatness grid. So Catherine, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Charlene. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Awesome.
And this amazing group of women.
Yeah, and thank you guys for those of us who made it here live this morning on an early Sunday morning. And we are all obviously recording it as well to be accessible. So Catherine and I have come up with 3 questions that we want to dig into for our conversation today. And I'm going to kick it off actually right from the get-go. And Catherine, I'm wondering if you could explain, like, we came up with a concept to kick off day 1 of the greatness grid. And I'm wondering if you could, in your words, explain what that is. What is the greatness grid, and why do you think it's so important for us, for women leaders, to unlock that grid, especially now heading into 2020?
Yeah, so to me, the greatness grid is similar to our network, but so I'm going to probably end up using, greatness grid and network interchangeably, but I guess I would say for everybody, don't confuse that with networking. So it's those people around you in your life who support you finding and achieving your higher purpose. And so to me, it's multifaceted, it's multi-layered, it's the personal, the professional, the spiritual, or more reflective, whatever that means to you, but it is multi-layered and multifaceted. And that's how I like to think of this concept of our greatness grid.
And what is that, like, when you think about unlocking that grid? So we're hoping that right now people are starting to visualize, kind of get a picture in their mind of what their own kind of grid looks like. Is it, is it colorful? Is it multi-dimensional, or circles or squares, or, you just get that visual in your head. So as you start to, like, physically unlock and expand that grid to get to get more potential out of it, what does that unlocking process look like to you?
Yeah, so I guess like when I visualize my greatness grid,
Mm-hmm.
I almost see it in little nodes, if you will. So these
Mm-hmm.
little kind of pieces that tie together. So although the nodes, so almost like a network, and I think that's really what you're getting at a bit with the word grid, like an electrical network. Um, so like a network, there are these pieces that work together a little more closely, but they're all connected as well in and of themselves to help serve sort of the greater purpose. And so I think, like for me, when I think about this idea of the greatness grid, I keep coming back to the fact that, to me, relationships are everything in life. No matter what aspect of our life we're talking about, relationships are foundational and fundamental to success. We don't achieve anything in life, whether it's our personal life or business dealings and business relationships or spiritual growth, completely on our own. We are always leveraging relationships. And so I think when I think about getting more intentional with this greatness grid or our network, I think the importance for me there is, if I fail to build meaningful relationships and maintain meaningful relationships, I will have missed a big part of life's purpose. And for me, you know, a big part of why we're here is to figure out why we're here, right? Each one of us is here on earth for a different reason. And so I think those relationships with others and what is reflected back to us through those relationships and through those people are really foundational in that journey of, why am I here? What is my purpose? Who am I here to serve? How can I serve best? So I don't see that I could ever really uncover that on my own. And that's, I think, where the greatness grid really comes into play in a really meaningful way for me.
Yeah, I just want to pause for a second and give us a chance to start to absorb what we're talking about here. It's a pretty meaty concept for first thing on a weekend morning. But so if there was anything that Catherine or I said that kind of landed for you, even one or two words, I'm going to encourage you to jot them down to further reflect on them. And what landed for me in what you said was I just don't believe that what we're here to do in this lifetime we can achieve alone. So it is through our relationships that we unlock our potential and we drive our work forward in the world. So if we're not actively looking and exploring how to unlock the potential of these relationships, we're holding ourselves back. And I think that's why the visual of that electrical circuit, that power circuit, really works for me when I visualize a grid, because not only are you trying to increase the efficiency or the duration or the reach of this power grid, you want to make sure and see, where it's flowing really well, where it needs to flow better. Where do you need another transformer? You know what I mean? Like where is there a total gap? Where's the power gone out? And we get it when we talk about literal power, like what would we do without it? But yet I just want to make sure that we're transferring that, to the power of our relationships, and how in fact the power of our relationships and the power of our potential dance together like super closely. And I don't know if, yeah, like, so that's why I wanted to kick off today with you. I just want to read a quote that Catherine shared, and it's also in your outline for today, in the website post for day one, and then we're getting into a little bit of process. But the quote is by Michael Skure. Am I saying that right, Skure? And you can't achieve anything entirely by yourself. There's a support system that is a basic requirement of human existence. To be happy and successful on earth, you just have to have people that you can rely on. So it's pretty basic, pretty straightforward, his quote in that. So my second question to Catherine is, it's about process. It's about, okay, this concept makes sense. How do I start to actually do something with it? So what's the process that you will go through this year to further unlock your grid? That might be the questions that you ask yourself, the people that you're after as you kind of observe from a higher level what the grid is, your starting point, the recommendations that you might make to other women. Yeah, I'm just curious if you can reflect on your process a little bit.
Yeah, so I think for me, as a starting point, when I think of this and becoming more intentional, is where I go to is back to this idea of these nodes, if you will, and this multifaceted, multi-layered piece, and starting to really define as a starting point, what are those nodes? What do they look like? What do they consist of? And so for me, I'll just share with you where my head is at with mine. And the first, there's kind of three nodes that I'm thinking of. And the first one sort of has two layers to them. And the first one is, who are those people who really care deeply for me and are very close to me? So they care deeply, they support me, they love me, but they will also challenge me appropriately when I need to be challenged. So challenging directly. So very much to me, that is the tightest part of my greatness grid. They are the closest to me. And very close to that group, I think there's another layer of people who, probably like share that same, caring for one another and willingness to challenge, but maybe are just a little less close in terms of proximity on a personal level. So while there is, I think any relationship has to be built on some personal connection, just a little bit further apart wouldn't be your first team, if you will, when you're having a big crisis or issue. So that's sort of that next layer out. So that's one node I'm thinking of. And then I've got another node, which are, who are those people that I aspire to be like? Who are those people, whether it's, and maybe there's, again, two pieces to this node. One is in my community that I could, access relatively easily, or then another node, which are people that are a little more separate geographically, which could be a little more of a challenge to create a relationship with. But so on a proximity basis, so this one node that's closer geographically, who are those people I aspire to be like, that I would consider, if I can build a relationship with them, they would be or are mentors to me. So I am actively learning and growing through that relationship in an intentional way. And then my third node, third main node, is, who are those people that need and or want my guidance and my service, where I can really serve in a mentor type of capacity, so that I'm giving to others as well. I guess as a side note, to me, all of these relationships are reciprocal, and there is a give and take and a sharing of the learning and the learner.
Right.
But this other group, this other node, I think would be that piece of the legacy of how am I building leaders of tomorrow. And that's another piece to me of my greatness grid. So that's how I've been thinking about the grid, is in these 3 sort of main nodes, and then they have other layers and facets to them.
We're gonna open it up. So I'm just I'll say that for a minute, because I'd like you to think about. Yeah, thank you. Whether it's in your chat, and I'm actually going to unmute you in a second here, but think about either a reflection back or a specific question. Because of timing, I'm going to ask you to, if you have one, to keep it tight. But Catherine, Dana's question is, how many people would you have in your in your grid, I guess, actively, that is workable? What's that?
So for me, that it really depends, and this is where I think it's helpful to like get out and sketch it and draw it out a little bit, because it depends on, I mean, there's going to be some aspects of that network that you're tapping into, your meeting face to face on a monthly basis, right? Like that, to me, that would be those people that are like really in the tightest part of my grid that I'm connecting with face to face on a monthly basis. So, and some of those people, like in my greatness grid, I have a lot of those people I can meet with together once a month, because we are very interconnected, if you will. And so there's that, but then there's, people who, again, on these other nodes, who are maybe a little bit farther from you, that you're actively connecting with once a quarter or 2 times a year. So I really think it depends on obviously how busy your calendar is with other things in your life, but also just how many people are in which part of your node, which is going to affect how frequently you're going to want to interact with people.
I'm going to ask Kelly if she's available. I just want to make a comment before I lose it. Oh, and then we're going to jump over to Wendy too. I think it's important to clarify the value of interaction, which is super valuable, as well as influence. So I think that your grid goes out in layers, and there's a certain amount of people, and I'm going to ask Kelly, because we've chatted about this, if she recalls, there's a certain amount of people that you can have just really like quality interactions where you're really like doing well with who's in your grid. But that's to say the network of which you have influence over expands out from there, and that's a much larger number. I'm just curious, Kel, if you could recall a conversation that we had. Did we not find some research that backed up how approximately 100 women was the sweet spot of who you could interact really well with in a grid? Do you recall that conversation?
I remember the conversation, and I remember us doing some work around it with one of your clients and having those conversations. And I think that's even at your outermost network
capacity,
right? In really, when you're looking at your true supports, your true individuals who are most connected to you, if you think about your first layer, I guess, or that first circle, it's very small, right? Who are you really going to go to for that support? Who are you really going to truly, truly lean on in more of that personal capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you think almost that next layer, so that initial is your core.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you that you're going to reach out to right now, today, when you need something? And then it starts to grow a little bit more, and I envision it like this core, this layer of earth, if you will, right? Expanding out from that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was, you kind of looked at 100, but that was at your outermost circle.
Right. Right. Yeah. And Dana makes a good point that in the book that we're digging into in our new book club, that they suggest a big potential suggests that 25 is our really a real workable for that, nice tight group. I just wanted to touch on, and then I want to circle back to Catherine again, is Wendy's asked the question, or, made the comment, like, what are some of the criteria that you have a look at for the people that you're actively looking to ensure are in your grid? How do you go about choosing your people? And I'm going to kick it off with a few thoughts, and then I'm going to come back to Catherine and see if she's got anything to add to that. But just building on what Catherine has said, I think that what we're talking about here is taking the level of our connections and our networking and our relationships deeper, like more meaningful, more intentional, more purposeful. So one of the criteria that I talk about are who are my people that are ready to mobilize and to be mobilized. So it's more about co-creating and purposeful intentional action for a common goal than it is only building quality relationships. So I've got numerous quality relationships. The people that are in my grid have a common goal, as I do. Their values, another criteria are values. Their values of alignment come from a place of heart-centered leadership. So we're both craving a higher level of living and leading and role modeling. So that's another criteria. Do we match on a value level? And then the third piece, I think, for me is around specificity. So do the people on my grid know what they can give and receive in terms of us moving forward and being mobilized? And in a lot of times that's where I get joy from my work, because I'm trying to help others also find specificity. But I think you could have a lot of great relationships. And I have a little joke that there's a lot of sitting around in circles singing Kumbaya. But for me, that's, like I'm really great, and I want to see those circles actually in a formation that's ready to move forward with intentional action. So I'd like to circle back to Catherine. We've got about 5 minutes, and Catherine, what are your thoughts around criteria, as well as if there was anything else about, just in terms of boiling it right back down for people and kind of going, okay, I get the concept. I understand part of the process. What would be my next steps? Like, where do I start today or this week? That's where I'd like to go.
Okay. So on the question from Wendy about criteria, I think for me, it really boils down to a couple things very similar to what you said, Charlene. And the first one is values. Do we share a common set of values? And or do I align with their value system? The second one is, do they believe in reciprocity, right? This give and take and back and forth, and a willingness to sort of step out there for you and help you out, knowing that you will do the same. And the last one is really, I think it's foundational to all meaningful relationships in our lives. And it comes back to trust. And it's about, do I believe this person will have my back? At the end of the day, will they have my back? Because I will have theirs. And again, they all tie together really, because that's reciprocity and that's also value systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of sort of a couple ideas on how can you make this, something tangible or tactical over the next little bit. The first one for me is naming those top 3 people that you really want to connect with. And so for me, as I describe these 3 nodes, these 3 main nodes, to me, it's as a very simplistic starting point, I'm going to pick one person from each of those nodes to kind of take my relationship and our relationship to the next level with, or establish a relationship if it's not already there. I think the other thing, and I had some fun with this earlier, and I've got a paper version and I've got a computer version, is like start playing with the visual of this. How many people have sat down and written out sort of that list of those key relationships? Not many, right? And it can be kind of fun because if you think about multifaceted and multi-layered and nodes, you can get, I think, super creative with what that looks like. Whether it's on paper or finding a computer program like the brain to kind of map something like that out to help you start to really see that, and also see where maybe you can also tap into another person's greatness grid and have that sort of exponential impact. And the last thing I would say this is really tactical, is about tools. So we talked about, there's these different layers or nodes, and you're going to connect in a different way with a different frequency with each of those areas or nodes or individuals. And so what's the tool you're going to use to prompt that? Because it's really easy to forget. And all of a sudden you go, holy smokes, I haven't talked to that person in a year. So, you can use, some kind of a CRM type system, set up reminders for yourself in a CRM. I've started using my life planner from some amazing entrepreneurs here in China. And I love the accountability tracker. And there's some really nice tools in there that I think can support that. And the last nugget I'll share is, and I share this with a bit of hesitation, but I say, if you're at all interested, check out this podcast. There were pieces of it where I found like some really good nuggets. And I'll be honest, there were a couple that rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, but I think that's okay. It's very interesting. So the gentleman's name is Jordan Harbinger, and he's quite a renowned network builder. And the podcast channel is called Superhumans at Work. And the podcast itself is called How to Build Your Social Capital. So I would recommend people check it out, because there's some very tactical ideas in there that you could probably find something in there to use.
Awesome. Catherine, I'm going to ask you, I'll transition now, and just before we close out, we will be continuing this conversation in our Facebook group for the PowHERcircle Challenge. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the link to the podcast in the Facebook group, just to make sure that if people want to find it, they can. Sure. I really do encourage you, everyone, to start to play with the visual of your grid this week. Even if you're just using first names, or if you kind of blur it out, I'd love to see grids posted to our Facebook page. I'd love to actually see the work in progress. And of course, my bigger vision is, because I can see the potential of this exercise as these grids start to crisscross. because that's really how you effectively build a collaborative collective. One of the first things that you learn in network marketing and why they're so incredibly successful, one of the first exercises is write out to the 200 people in your network that want to see you succeed. So there are principles that are tried and true, and then how do these grids start to interlock with each other to build a very comprehensive, cohesive, collaborative collective across Canada and beyond that really is driven to make impact, heart-centered leaders, and I think that's where the potential is at. But it starts with us. It starts with us getting organized in our own grid. You know, who are your 25 people, and on from there. So thank you very much, Catherine, for helping me facilitate the call today. And for those of you who are able to join us live today, thank you very, very much. I will put our recording into the Facebook group for those of you who need it. And I hope we can continue that conversation in the group. Tomorrow morning, I will be excited to welcome Christina Benty to the call, and we'll carry on the conversation from here. So thank you very much for being here, you guys. Have a great day today. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.